Hi everyone, I'm taking a few minutes before I start a very busy day to tell you about what I have read recently. Oh my god. Okay, let's see. Putting them in. Wait. Oh, shoot. Okay, so I got this from the library as a hold. I didn't think it was going to come in as quickly as it did, but here it is. And I have not listened or watched reviews on this book except for from Nathan's Nook. I didn't know if this was going to be a book, since it deals with grief, whether it was going to be too close to the bone. I think everyone that feels like they may read this book is going to make that decision, because based on your own situation and circumstances. I was able to read this at this point, and what I really appreciated after I read the book is this description on the back, which says darkly funny and full of exuberant, pitch-perfect sentences. Agree. Death Valley is also a glorious departure for Melissa Broder, a heart-rending exploration of daughterhood, a deep dive into anticipatory grief. I think that really nails it for me. Anticipatory grief, and a hardcore story of survival. Witty, trippy, surreal. I've only read Melissa Broder's The Pisces, which was like a year or so ago. And I didn't know much about this book. That's how I wanted it. I didn't want to know anything about it other than I had heard Nathan's experience. This is about the main character. Is she named? The main character is 41. She's a writer. She's writing a book about a woman in the desert. That's why she ends up in Death Valley to do that research. She has a father who's had an accident and is in the ICU and is clinging on to life. He's not recovering as fast as he should. He has setbacks, and she's preparing herself. She's preparing herself for the what looks like the inevitable. And she has a husband who, like, for the last handful of years, has a mysterious illness. They've been to many doctors, and they haven't been able to really define what it is, but it's worsening. The way she describes her relationship with her husband, like very satirical, dark humor, super comfortable with themselves. I feel like I got the impression that her husband really drew out just the ability to be fully yourself. She talks about how difficult it is to be with someone that has an illness, number one, that's mysterious, number two, that's progressing, and how do you be the right caretaker? She's challenged. She's all the things that you could imagine would happen to a caretaker, or at least I should say she feels like she's an emotional caretaker. And over such a long period of time, I felt like that was like so real and well done, in how she's beating herself up for not being more supportive, or for having thoughts about being angry at times and things like that. I just felt like that was so relatable as a human. And she talks about her time with her dad and the ups and downs in the ICU, and not knowing what's going to happen, but preparing yourself, trying to steel yourself for what you feel is going to be the inevitable, and how your family position, whether you're the baby of the family or the oldest child gets intensified in these situations, whether it's someone who is in her dad's position or when a death in the family happens, how either your family, your position in the family intensifies, or you end up having to take up the mantle. Maybe you've never had to do that before, but that's what the circumstances call for. It's an interesting thing that happens in those times. I loved the surrealism in this book. I'm not somebody who likes surrealism, but I was all in on this. I gobbled this up. I couldn't get enough of it. It was like being on a fast train, but also on a really darkly funny train. I loved all the dark humor. I thought her time in the desert was amazingly written. I felt like her tracking rabbits to see what they were eating is a brilliant idea. I loved the Best Western part of the story, the two people at the front desk at the Best Western and how they become a part of her conversation, and how conversations with strangers when you're in a really tense and new situation as she's dealing with can be so endearing and helpful, and how the Best Western breakfast to go bags save her life almost in the desert. I loved it. This will definitely be one of my favorite reads this year. That's how I didn't think that was going to be true, because I'd read the Pisces. I know, or I thought I knew what kind of writing she was capable of. I mean, that is a strange book, but I adored this. I have flags everywhere on this thing, which I will, of course, remove. I'm here at the Best Western for a week under the pretext of figuring out the desert section of my next novel. If I'm honest, I came to escape a feeling, an attempt that's already going poorly, because unfortunately, I've brought myself with me. I see, as the last pink light creeps out to infinity, that I'm still the kind of person who makes another person's coma all about me. Wow. What's brilliant about this, and I made a note about it, is that she gains clarity, how she gains clarity about her relationship with her father, and how she can see more clearly, more fully, the relationship with her husband and really appreciate him in a way that, because she's so close to the day-to-day, she hadn't been doing. And she says, it's miraculous. This is about her husband. It's miraculous what he's done in illness. What he has done is miraculous. If he were here with me now, I would tell him, I would say, you are miraculous. Miraculous what you've done with love, alone in your own desert. Not alone, but feeling alone. Because you were with me and I didn't understand, however much I would have wanted to, however much I tried. I could not understand until I understood. And will forget again if I make it out of here alive. Not alone, but all the while between us a great divide. How did you do it? How did you stay so kind? Ugh. The Slaves of Solitude. Oh, how much I love this book. You know, I read the introduction to this book after I read the book, which is when you should read an introduction after, because you never know. There's so many spoilers in introductions. But the sharpness, in my previous reading update, I had read a section and just given an example of the sharpness of the writing and the structure of Patrick Hamilton's sentences. I wasn't surprised to see that most of his success and how he made a living was to write two plays, stage plays, Rope and Gaslight, and then he eventually wrote this book in 1947, and he died early though. He, I think, was an alcoholic. Oh, no, wait. But at the peak of his early celebrity, he was run over by a recklessly driven car, badly injured and facially disfigured. This misfortune accelerated an inherited tendency to alcoholism. Yeah, so it was the accident that made things worse for poor Patrick. But this has there's somebody in here at the time this book was written said this was one of the best World War II books ever written, novel, but nothing about the war itself. This is about the people living in boarding houses, as a lot of people were doing because they were bombed out of London and other parts. So Miss Roach, the main character, survives this boarding house experience, even with the impossible Mr. Thwaites, who's a bully of the highest order, and her so-called friend, who she brings into the boarding house, Vicky Klugman, who's a German who's lived in England for a long time. I was cheerleading for Miss Roach. I wanted Miss Roach to win the psychological battle with Mr. Thwaites. I was hoping Mr. Thwaites would just be thrown out of the boarding house, but no, he's one of those psychological bullies. So I so recommend this to anyone that enjoys 1940s, 1930s, mid-century writing. This really stands above many books that I've read, or stands with. I am so happy that I read this. I don't know that there's any other books that are known to be as good as this one from Patrick, unfortunately, but this one definitely is worth anyone's time. I am happily halfway through Foreign Affairs. I'll have more to say about this later. I'm too into the story of Vinny and her and Fred and Rosemary and all the people on in this book in London to say more about that now. Oh, speaking of sad things and books about grief, right after I finished Death Valley, coincidentally, as I'm reading this all year, for some reason now I have all these tabs, now that I'm 1,200 pages in, I read one of the saddest chapters so far in, 330 days of reading a chapter at a time. It was, to be precise, it was chapter 1 of volume 4, part 4. And we're, back again at some of the houses, some of the families who had men sent to war. But we got to know these men in the peace section. You don't realize that this book is peace and war and peace, or aftermath. But that's how it feels that it is. But, I had to get to page 1197 to read one of the saddest chapters and one of the most beautiful chapters in War and Peace. Beautiful because of the way that Tolstoy expresses Natasha's grief over her beloved Pierre. I could not believe the writing that I was reading in this chapter. And then it continued in chapter 2, just when you thought that was over. And how someone that's in deep grief, when they see someone grieving harder, can somehow provide comfort, which then brings them or gives them purpose alongside their own grief. I mean, just such beautiful chapter 1, chapter 2, and 3 of this part is so beautifully written. Just when you think, You couldn't have read any more wonderful prose. It's right there. It's right there. 330 some days in. Just crazy. So that's my, oh, I just want to say really quick, I'm really enjoying this, reading it alongside War and Peace now. I mean, not alongside because I'm almost done, but Adam Zamoyski's Moscow 1812. It's answered a lot of questions for me. I'm really glad, though, I'm reading it now that I'm almost done with War and Peace, because I just feel like, I don't know, I've enjoyed backfilling in my knowledge, or I have no knowledge of this time of history, but like understanding why the Russians were speaking French so much in the beginning of the story was a real mystery, and now I've gotten the answer here from that, just from learning about Russia at that time in history. But I'm at the point where we're almost in Moscow. So I'm not reading every chapter. I am reading chapters that I feel like are the most interesting to me. I may start this now, since I have it out from the library. A beautiful edition of The Weather in the Streets by Rosamund Lehman. I will be starting Kudos, I think, around Thanksgiving. I'm going to talk to the person who thought they might also start Kudos around Thanksgiving. Rosamund Lehman, published in 1936. Beautiful edition by Virago. I think this was her fourth book, and Dusty Answer, the one that I read this summer, was her first. So we'll see if I'm going to start this now, and I will let you know about that. All right, well, let me know about any books that you're reading right now. It is what's today? It's like mid-November. Yeah, it's the 15th. And let me know about, here we go, any of these books that I've just talked about. Melissa Broder, Alison Lurie, The Slaves of Solitude, Patrick Hamilton, and Rosamund Lehman. Of course, I have War and Peace down here at the Junkster on the floor. Yeah, let me know. Please join the conversation down below. And thanks for joining. I hope to see you on the next one.